Hey there, friends, and welcome back to another episode of 3-Minute Thoughts. My name is Derek, and every day we take a few minutes to open Scripture, slow down a little bit, and reflect on what God might be teaching us through the lives of ordinary people navigating extraordinary circumstances. In other words, we're reading about followers of God in the Bible. Today, we're in Acts chapter 23, and if we're honest, this chapter feels a lot like what happens when everything starts going sideways. Paul is standing before the Jewish council trying to explain himself. He begins by saying that he has lived before God with a clear conscience, and almost immediately he's struck across the mouth. Not exactly a warm reception. The meeting quickly devolves into conflict, chaos, but Paul notices something interesting. Part of the council are Sadducees, and part are Pharisees. Okay, so the Sadducees are sad, you see, because they don't believe in the resurrection, but the Pharisees do. So Paul says, "It is with respect to the hope and the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial." And just like that, the room erupts. The argument becomes so intense that the Roman commander has to pull Paul out for his own safety. At this point, Paul has to be wondering what comes next. He's been arrested, misunderstood, attacked, and the future looks, well, anything but certain. Then comes one of the most encouraging verses in the entire chapter. That night, the Lord stands by Paul and says, "Take courage, for as you have testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify also in Rome." Now, don't miss that. Jesus doesn't immediately solve Paul's problem. He doesn't release him from prison or remove the opposition, but rather he gives them a promise, a reminder that God is still in control of his story, and sometimes that's exactly what we need as well. Then things get even more intense. More than 40 men form a conspiracy and take an oath not to eat or drink until they've killed Paul. They're serious, determined, committed even. But then something unexpected happens. Paul's nephew overhears about the plot. We don't know much about him. In fact, this is the only place he's mentioned in the entire Bible, but he speaks up. He tells Paul. Paul sends him to the commander. And because one young man paid attention and acted courageously, the entire plot was exposed. That night, hundreds of soldiers escort Paul safely out of the city towards Caesarea. The chapter ends with Paul still under guard, still in prison, but still protected, still moving toward God's purpose, still not abandoned. Remember, God promised to get Paul to Rome. He didn't promise to get him out of problems. So let's look at chapter 23. It asks us a question: who do you listen to when things fall apart? Because there were plenty of voices surrounding Paul. Anger, fear, threat, accusations, all of them were voices screaming at Paul. But the voice that mattered the most was the one that said, "Take courage." That's a voice we should probably listen to as well. Another question we wrestle with in this chapter is, do you trust that God is still working when you can't see the whole picture? Because from Paul's perspective, if life probably looked like one obstacle after another. Yet behind the scenes, God was arranging conversations, opportunities, and protection that Paul could not have anticipated. Hey friends, that's all we have time for today. Be well.